Jake Harrison stepped off the transport shuttle onto Kepler Station and immediately felt the weight of 100 alien eyes watching him. The massive trading hub stretched in all directions, its curved walls lined with shops and meeting halls, where dozens of species conducted their business. The air hummed with translation devices converting countless languages into something resembling understanding. He adjusted his diplomatic uniform and walked toward the central plaza where today's negotiations would take place. Behind him, Lieutenant Amy Carter carried a case of data tablets and trade agreements. She looked nervous, which Jake understood completely. This was her first time dealing with the Zephyrians, and their reputation preceded them. The Zephyrians controlled 3 star systems and had technology that could crush human colonies without breaking a sweat. They were also incredibly proud, which made every meeting with them feel like walking through a minefield. One wrong word could end trade relations for decades. Jake had been doing this job for 8 years now, ever since he left the military. He had learned that the key to dealing with proud alien species was simple: show respect but never show fear. The moment they sensed weakness, negotiations became impossible. The central plaza opened up before them like a vast cathedral. Alien merchants hawked their goods from floating platforms while diplomats from various worlds clustered around negotiation tables. But Jake's attention went immediately to the raised platform at the center where Lord Vextar Cole held court. The Zephyrian noble stood nearly 8 feet tall, his crystalline skin shifting from deep blue to pale silver as he spoke. His voice carried easily across the plaza, enhanced by some kind of natural resonance that made every word sound important. Around him, a crowd of lesser aliens hung on his every word like he was dispensing wisdom from the gods themselves. Next to Lord Cole stood his wife, Lady Senna Cole. She was beautiful in the way that Zephyrian females were beautiful, with silver markings along her neck and arms that indicated royal bloodline. But unlike her husband, she seemed uncomfortable with all the attention. Her skin stayed a muted gold color, and she kept her eyes downcast while he spoke. Jake had read about Zephyrian marriage customs during his preparation for this meeting. Wives were considered valuable property, symbols of their husband's status and power. They had little say in their own lives and were expected to remain silent unless directly addressed. The practice disgusted Jake, but he was here as a diplomat, not a social reformer. "Ah, the human delegation arrives," Lord Cole announced as Jake approached the platform. "How convenient. I was just explaining to our friends here about the fascinating nature of lesser species." The crowd turned to stare at Jake and Amy. Jake kept his expression neutral and climbed the steps to the platform. "Lord Cole, thank you for agreeing to meet with us today. I hope we can reach agreements that benefit both our peoples." Lord Cole's skin shifted to an amused green color. "Benefits, yes. Though I wonder what benefits humanity could possibly offer to a civilization as advanced as ours. Your people are clever with their little tools and gadgets, I will grant you that, but true strength, true power, comes from within." The alien crowd murmured agreement. Jake noticed that Lady Senna's skin flickered briefly to a darker shade, but she said nothing. Humans have always believed that intelligence and cooperation can overcome physical limitations, Jake replied carefully. "We prefer to solve problems through innovation rather than force." "Innovation," Lord Cole repeated the word like it tasted bad, a fancy term for admitting weakness. "When faced with a true challenge, all your innovations crumble like dust. You are clever insects, I will admit, but insects nonetheless." Jake felt his jaw clench but kept his voice steady. "With respect, Lord Cole, I think you underestimate human capabilities. We may not be as physically strong as Zephyrians, but we have proven ourselves capable of remarkable achievements when motivated." Lord Cole's skin shifted to bright orange, which Jake recognized as the color of aggressive amusement. "Remarkable achievements? Such as hiding behind energy shields while braver species do the real fighting? Such as building machines to do work that honorable beings do with their own hands?" The crowd laughed, and Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks. Amy shifted nervously beside him, but Jake placed a calming hand on her arm. "I have seen human courage firsthand, Lord Cole. In the war against the hegemony, human soldiers fought alongside Zephyrian warriors with equal bravery. Equal? Lord Cole's voice rose. Your soldiers cowered behind cover while ours charged the enemy lines. Your generals sent machines to do the dangerous work while ours led from the front. There is no equality between insects and true warriors. The insults were getting worse, and Jake realized this was not going according to plan. Lord Cole was not interested in negotiation. He was putting on a show for the crowd, demonstrating his superiority by humiliating the human diplomat. If you truly believe humans are so inferior, Jake said quietly, perhaps you would not object to a simple demonstration. The plaza fell silent. Lord Cole's skin shifted to surprised yellow before settling back to orange. What sort of demonstration? Any test of capability you choose. Physical, mental, or spiritual. If humans are as weak as you claim, it should be easy for you to prove it. Amy grabbed Jake's arm, but he gently pulled free. He knew this was risky, but backing down now would confirm every stereotype Lord Cole had expressed. Lord Cole studied Jake for a long moment, his skin cycling through several colors as he thought. Finally he began to smile, showing teeth that gleamed like polished metal. Very well, human. I propose the trial of 7 spheres. A gasp ran through the crowd. Jake saw Lady Senna's skin flash bright white with shock before returning to muted gold. The trial of 7 spheres, Lord Cole continued, is the ancient test by which Zephyrian warriors prove their worth. It examines strength, speed, endurance, wisdom, courage, honor, and spiritual unity. No non-Zephyrian has ever completed it successfully. Most who attempt it die in the process. Jake felt cold sweat on his back but kept his expression calm. And if I were to succeed? Lord Cole's laugh boomed across the plaza. Succeed? Human, you will not survive the first trial. But very well, let us make this interesting. If by some impossible chance you complete the trial of 7 spheres, I will forfeit my most prized possession. And what would that be? Lord Cole gestured grandly toward his wife. The hand of Lady Senna Cole in marriage? She would become your wife, bound to serve you as she now serves me. The crowd erupted in shocked whispers. Lady Senna's skin went completely white, then began cycling rapidly through colors Jake had never seen before. That is impossible, someone called from the crowd. Zephyrian law forbids. Zephyrian law permits a husband to wager his wife's marriage bond if the stakes are worthy, Lord Cole interrupted. And what stakes could be more worthy than proving the superiority of our race over these clever insects? Jake looked at Lady Senna. For just a moment, their eyes met, and he saw something there he had not expected. Not just fear or anger, but a desperate kind of hope. He turned back to Lord Cole. I accept your challenge. The Zephyrian warship, Eternal Glory, was massive beyond anything Jake had imagined. As their shuttle approached the docking bay, he could see weapon arrays that could level cities and armor plating thick enough to shrug off nuclear weapons. This was where the trial of 7 spheres would take place. Deep in the heart of Zephyrian military power, Amy sat across from him in the shuttle, her face pale as she scrolled through data on her tablet. Jake, I've been researching everything I can find about this trial. It's not good news. Tell me. The trial of 7 spheres was created over 1,000 years ago by the first Zephyrian emperor. It was designed to test every aspect of what they consider the perfect warrior. Physical strength, speed, endurance, mental wisdom, spiritual courage, personal honor, and something they call unity with the eternal flow. Jake nodded, trying to absorb the information. How many non-Zephyrians have attempted it? Amy's voice was quiet. 17 over the centuries. None survived past the 4th trial. Most died during the 2nd or 3rd. The shuttle shuddered as it entered the docking bay. Jake could see Zephyrian soldiers waiting for them, their crystalline skin gleaming under the harsh lights. Lord Cole had given him 48 hours to prepare, which seemed generous until Amy explained that most candidates spent months training for each individual trial. There's something else, Amy said as they prepared to disembark. I found records of the trial equipment. Some of it is over 800 years old, and it's all calibrated for Zephyrian physiology. The gravity chambers, the mental testing apparatus, the spiritual resonance devices, they're all designed around Zephyrian biology. So I'll be fighting with one hand tied behind my back, more like both hands and both feet. They were escorted through the ship's corridors by silent guards. The walls were covered with carvings that seemed to tell the story of great Zephyrian victories. Jake saw images of their warriors defeating dozens of alien species, always through displays of superior strength and courage. Their quarters were comfortable but clearly designed for beings much larger than humans. The ceiling stretched 15 feet above them, and the furniture was sized for 8-foot-tall occupants. Jake felt like a child playing in an adult's house. I need you to research everything you can about Zephyrian culture and philosophy, Jake told Amy as she set up her equipment. If I'm going to survive this, I need to understand how they think. Amy was already working, her fingers flying over multiple tablets. Jake, what were you thinking back there? Lord Cole played you perfectly. He wanted you to challenge him. I know. But backing down would have confirmed everything he said about human weakness. Sometimes you have to take a stand, even when the odds are impossible. And if you die? Jake was quiet for a moment. Then at least I'll die trying to prove that humans are more than clever insects. Hours passed as Amy gathered information while Jake tried to prepare his body for what was coming. He did push-ups and stretches, knowing they would make little difference against trials designed to challenge beings twice his size and strength. Soft chime at the door interrupted his exercise. Jake opened it to find Lady Senna standing in the corridor, her skin a nervous pale blue color. She glanced around quickly, then stepped inside. I should not be here, she said in accented but clear English. If my husband discovers this visit, there will be consequences. Then why did you come? Lady Senna's skin shifted to a darker shade. Because I have watched 17 beings attempt the trial of 7 spheres. I have seen them broken and killed by trials designed to prove Zephyrian superiority. You do not understand what you have agreed to. Jake gestured for her to sit, though. The chairs were too large for comfortable conversation. Tell me, the trial of 7 spheres is not meant to be fair. It is meant to demonstrate that no other species can match Zephyrian capabilities. The equipment is calibrated to push even our strongest warriors to their limits. For a human, it will be impossible. Then why are you warning me? According to the wager, if I fail, nothing changes for you. Lady Senna was quiet for a long moment, her skin cycling through shades of blue and silver. My husband believes he owns me completely. He wagers my life as if I were a piece of property. But perhaps there is a small part of me that hopes someone might prove him wrong. What can you tell me about the trials? The first trial tests raw physical strength. Candidates must manipulate massive crystalline structures while fighting against increasing gravity fields. Most non-Zephyrians are crushed by the gravitational pressure before they can even attempt the lifting portion. Jake nodded, filing away the information. And the others? Speed, endurance, wisdom, courage, honor, and spiritual unity. Each trial builds on the previous ones, becoming more dangerous as exhaustion sets in. The spiritual trial has killed more candidates than all the others combined. Why? Lady Senna's skin shifted to a deep purple color that Jake had learned indicated sadness. Because it requires perfect harmony with the eternal flow, the cosmic force that connects all Zephyrian consciousness. Non-Zephyrians cannot achieve this unity. Their minds are structured differently. Amy looked up from her research. What exactly is the eternal flow? It is difficult to explain in human terms. It is the spiritual energy that flows through all living things, but Zephyrians have evolved to sense and manipulate it directly. It guides our emotions, our decisions, our understanding of honor and purpose. Jake felt a chill. So the final trial requires me to do something that's biologically impossible for humans. Yes, this is why I came to warn you. My husband has never lost a wager because he only makes wagers he knows he can win. He chose the trial of 7 spheres specifically because no human could possibly complete it. Has he ever arranged for accidents during trials? Lady Senna's skin went completely white. You know about that? I suspected. A being doesn't maintain a perfect record through fair play alone. 3 of the 17 candidates died in ways that seemed suspicious. Equipment. Malfunctions that occurred at precisely the wrong moments. Safety systems that failed when they were needed most. But nothing could be proven? Jake stood and began pacing, thinking hard. What would happen if I withdrew from the challenge now? Your reputation would be destroyed. Every species in the galaxy would know that humans backed down from a fair challenge. Trade relations with dozens of worlds would suffer. And if I go through with it and die? The same result, but you would be remembered as brave rather than cowardly. Amy closed her tablet. There has to be another option. Lady Senna stood to leave. There is one thing. The trials test Zephyrian ideals of perfection, but they do not specify how those ideals must be achieved. Previous candidates have tried to match our methods exactly. Perhaps a human approach might find different solutions. What do you mean? Zephyrians value direct confrontation and overwhelming force. We solve problems by being stronger, faster, and more spiritually pure than our opponents. But humans have different strengths, do they not? Jake thought about this. We adapt, we innovate. We find ways around obstacles instead of smashing through them. Exactly. The trials measure results, not methods. If you can achieve the required outcomes through human methods rather than Zephyrian ones, you might have a chance. After Lady Senna left, Jake and Amy worked through the night developing strategies for each trial. They couldn't match Zephyrian strength, but perhaps they could outsmart Zephyrian expectations. The next morning, Lord Cole's guards came to escort Jake to the trial arena. As he walked through the ship's corridors, he saw crowds of Zephyrian nobles gathering to watch the spectacle. Word had spread quickly, and viewing rights were being sold to anyone wealthy enough to afford them. The arena itself was ancient and sacred, carved from a single massive crystal deep in the ship's core. Thousands of years of Zephyrian history seemed to echo from its walls. Jake felt very small and very human standing at its center. Lord Cole appeared on a viewing platform above, his skin bright orange with anticipation. Welcome, human, to your doom. Let the trials begin. The first trial chamber opened before Jake like the mouth of some ancient beast. Massive crystalline structures hung from the ceiling on chains that looked thick enough to anchor starships. The gravity field generators hummed with barely contained power, and Jake could already feel the increased weight pressing down on his shoulders. The test of strength, Lord Cole announced from his viewing platform. The candidate must move all 7 crystal formations into their proper alignment while the gravity field increases every 60 seconds. Previous Zephyrian candidates have completed this trial through pure physical power. Jake studied the crystals carefully. Each one was easily 3 times his height and probably weighed several tons under normal gravity. The alignment points were marked on the floor in complex geometric patterns that seemed to follow some kind of mathematical sequence. Amy's voice crackled through his earpiece. Jake, I've analyzed the pattern. It's based on Zephyrian numerical philosophy. Each crystal needs to be positioned to create harmonic resonance. The gravity field activated, and Jake immediately felt his knees buckle under double normal weight. In 60 seconds, it would increase again. He had maybe 4 minutes before the gravitational force would crush him completely. Instead of approaching the largest crystal first, as previous candidates had done, Jake examined the chains and support systems. His military engineering background kicked in as he analyzed load distributions and pivot points. The Zephyrians had built this trial assuming brute force would be applied directly to the crystals themselves, but humans had invented pulleys and levers for a reason. Jake found a loose chain from one of the smaller crystals and began wrapping it around the support beam above the largest formation. The watching Zephyrians murmured in confusion as he created an improvised pulley system instead of simply grabbing the crystal and trying to move it. The gravity increased to 3 times normal. Jake's breathing became labored, but his pulley system allowed him to redirect the crystal's weight rather than fighting it directly. He pulled on the chain, and the massive formation began to swing slowly toward its alignment point. Impossible. Someone whispered from the viewing area. Jake's muscles screamed as he guided the crystal into position, but the mechanical advantage made it possible where pure strength would have failed. He quickly moved to the second crystal, using the mounting brackets as anchor points to create another lever system. By the time the gravity reached 5 times normal, Jake had moved 4 of the 7 crystals. His vision was starting to blur from the pressure, but he kept working. The Zephyrian observers had fallen completely silent, watching in amazement as the small human accomplished through ingenuity what their strongest warriors achieved through raw power. The final 3 crystals required a different approach. Jake noticed that they were smaller and mounted on rotating bases. Instead of moving them horizontally, he could adjust their orientation to create the required harmonic pattern. Using a piece of chain as a wrench, he began rotating the crystals into alignment. The gravity field reached 6 times normal just as Jake locked the last crystal into position. The resonance pattern activated, filling the chamber with a pure, beautiful tone that seemed to emerge from the crystals themselves. Jake collapsed to one knee, gasping for air. But he had passed the first trial. Lord Cole's skin had shifted to an angry red color. "Beginner's luck," he announced. "The test of speed will end this charade." The second trial chamber was a 3-dimensional maze suspended in zero gravity. Holographic barriers created a complex network of passages that shifted and changed every few seconds. The objective was simple: reach the center of the maze and retrieve a glowing orb before the time limit expired. Zephyrian candidates rely on their natural speed and reflexes, Amy's voice informed him. Average completion time is 43 seconds. Jake pushed off from the starting platform and immediately realized why this trial was so deadly for other species. The maze was designed for beings with Zephyrian proportions and reflexes. The passages were sized for 8-foot-tall warriors with long limbs and powerful muscles, but Jake was smaller and more compact. Passages that Zephyrians had to squeeze through were comfortable corridors for him, openings that barely accommodated. Their broad shoulders gave him room to maneuver freely. More importantly, Jake's military training had included urban combat in zero-gravity environments. While Zephyrians moved through the maze like swimmers pushing through water, Jake used walls and barriers to ricochet off surfaces, changing direction instantly and maintaining momentum through 3-dimensional space. The holographic barriers shifted, trying to trap him in dead ends, but Jake's smaller size allowed him to slip through gaps that would stop larger candidates. He bounced off a wall, shot through a narrow opening, and twisted in midair to avoid a closing barrier. 20-8 seconds after entering the maze, Jake's hand closed around the glowing orb. The chamber fell silent except for the sound of his breathing. "Impossible," Lord Cole repeated, but his voice was less confident now. The test of endurance was a chamber of horrors that cycled through extreme temperatures, toxic atmospheres, and sensory deprivation. Candidates had to survive for 1 full hour while the environment tried to break their will and body. The chamber started with freezing temperatures that made Jake's breath visible in white puffs. His diplomatic uniform provided little protection, as ice began forming on the walls around him. Most candidates would try to fight the cold through physical activity, burning energy they would need for the trials ahead. Instead, Jake drew on meditation techniques he had learned during his military service. He controlled his breathing, slowed his heart rate, and mentally compartmentalized the discomfort. The cold was just information, he told himself. It couldn't hurt him unless he let it. The temperature swung to scorching heat that made the air shimmer. Jake removed his jacket and focused on staying hydrated from his water supply. He found a position where air circulation was slightly better and remained as still as possible to conserve energy. The toxic atmosphere phase was the worst. Gas that burned his lungs and made his eyes water filled the chamber. Jake wrapped his shirt around his face as a makeshift filter and breathed in shallow, controlled breaths. He had survived chemical attacks during the war by staying calm and thinking clearly rather than panicking. The sensory deprivation phase plunged the chamber into complete darkness and silence. Many candidates broke during this portion, overcome by claustrophobia and disorientation. But Jake had spent months in isolated posts during his military career. He knew how to find peace in solitude and strength in silence. When the hour ended and the chamber lights returned, Jake was still standing, tired, dehydrated, and shaken. But still standing, Lord Cole's skin was now cycling rapidly between colors, a sign of extreme agitation. Several of the watching nobles were murmuring among themselves, and Jake caught words like unprecedented and remarkable. "The test of wisdom," Lord Cole announced with forced confidence. "Surely the human will fail when faced with challenges that require true intelligence rather than mere physical endurance." The wisdom trial presented Jake with a series of complex scenarios displayed on holographic screens. Military strategy problems, philosophical puzzles, and logical paradoxes that had stumped candidates for centuries. Each problem built on the previous ones, creating an interconnected web of challenges that tested not just intelligence but the ability to see patterns and connections. The first scenario was a classic military problem: how to defeat a larger force with limited resources. The expected Zephyrian solution involved direct confrontation, using superior individual strength to overcome numerical disadvantage. Jake approached it differently. Instead of fighting the larger force directly, he identified their supply lines and communication networks. He designed a strategy that would isolate enemy units and force them to surrender without major battles. The solution was elegant in its efficiency and completely unexpected. The second challenge was a philosophical puzzle about the nature of honor. Traditional Zephyrian philosophy valued personal glory and individual achievement above all else. The puzzle asked how a warrior should choose between personal honor and the welfare of others. Jake's answer drew on human concepts of duty and sacrifice. He argued that true honor came not from personal glory but from willingness to put others before yourself. The response challenged fundamental Zephyrian beliefs about what made a warrior worthy, problem after problem. Jake provided solutions that were logical, effective, and completely alien to Zephyrian thinking. Where they saw situations requiring force, he found diplomatic solutions. Where they valued individual achievement, he emphasized cooperation and teamwork. By the end of the wisdom trial, the watching nobles were no longer murmuring among themselves. They were engaged in heated debates about the human's unconventional answers. Some argued that his solutions were invalid because they didn't follow Zephyrian tradition. Others insisted that results mattered more than methods. Jake had passed 4 trials, more than any non-Zephyrian in history. But the most dangerous challenges still lay ahead, and Lord Cole was clearly becoming desperate to see him fail. Captain Rexvorn, who had been observing from the military section, stepped forward. The test of courage chamber was unlike anything Jake had seen before. Dark metal walls covered in strange symbols stretched up into shadows, and the air itself seemed to hum with unseen energy. Strange lights flickered at the edges of his vision, and he could hear whispers in languages he didn't recognize. The test of courage uses psychic technology to manifest your deepest fears. Amy's voice crackled through his earpiece, but the signal was weak and distorted. Previous candidates have faced everything from childhood terrors to species-specific phobias. Lord Cole's voice boomed from speakers hidden in the walls. This trial will show us what humans truly fear. Will it be death, human? Pain? Failure? Soon we will see what lies at the core of your weak species. The chamber began to shift around Jake. The walls melted away, replaced by scenes from his memory. He was back on Kepler Station, but something was wrong. The diplomatic meeting was happening again. But this time, when he accepted Lord Cole's challenge, Amy stepped forward to stop him. "Jake, don't do this," the vision of Amy pleaded. "You're going to get yourself killed for nothing. Think about your family, your friends, everyone who depends on you." The scene shifted. Now Jake was in his childhood home, watching his parents argue about his decision to join the military. His mother was crying, begging him not to go to war. His father stood silent, disappointed that his son was willing to throw his life away on principle. "You always do this," his mother sobbed. "You always think you have to save everyone." "But what about us? What about the people who love you? Why is proving a point more important than staying alive?" Jake felt the familiar weight of guilt settle on his shoulders. This was his deepest fear, not death or pain, but the fear that his need to do what was right might hurt the people he cared about. The fear that his principles were really just selfishness in disguise. The scene changed again. Now he was watching Lady Senna being dragged away by Zephyrian guards while Lord Cole laughed. "You failed, human," the vision of Lord Cole taunted. "Because of your weakness, she will suffer. Because of your pride, an innocent being will pay the price." Jake's hands trembled as he watched the scene play out. This was what he truly feared, that his actions would cause suffering for others, that his attempt to prove human worth would result in tragedy for someone who had shown him kindness. The psychic technology pressed deeper into his mind, showing him vision after vision of failure and consequences. Amy dying because he wasn't there to protect her. His parents receiving news of his death. Lady Senna trapped forever with a cruel husband because he had given her false hope. But then Jake remembered something. Lady Senna had told him. The trials. Measured results, not methods. The test of courage was supposed to prove that he could face his fears and overcome them. But what if facing fears didn't mean conquering them? What if it meant accepting them and choosing to act anyway? Jake stopped trying to fight the visions. Instead, he spoke to them directly. "You're right," he said to the vision of his mother. "I am risking my life on principle. And yes, that might hurt people who care about me. But sometimes doing the right thing requires sacrifice." The vision flickered, confused by his response. "And you're right too," Jake said to the vision of Lord Cole. "I might fail, and Lady Senna might suffer because of it. But she's already suffering. At least this way, there's a chance for something better." The chamber began to shake as the psychic technology struggled to process his responses. Previous candidates had either been overwhelmed by their fears or had tried to deny them completely. Jake was doing neither. He was acknowledging his fears as valid while refusing to let them control his actions. "Fear is information," Jake said to the empty air. "It tells me what I value and what I might lose. But it doesn't get to make my decisions for me." The visions shattered like glass and the chamber returned to normal. Jake stood alone in the center, breathing hard but unbroken. He had passed the test of courage not by being fearless, but by being afraid and choosing courage anyway. From the viewing platform, he could hear shocked murmurs. No candidate had ever approached the courage trial this way before. Lord Cole's voice was tight with anger when he announced the next trial. "The test of honor? Here, surely the human will reveal his true nature?" The honor trial chamber contained a simple setup that made Jake's blood run cold. In the center of the room sat a cage containing what appeared to be a terrified alien child. Near the cage was a control panel with two buttons, one red, one green. A holographic display showed the trial parameters. Jake could press the red button, which would eliminate the prisoner but allow him to complete the trial quickly and safely. Or he could press the green button, which would free the prisoner but trigger a deadly obstacle course that he would have to navigate while the child escaped. Previous candidates have all chosen the practical solution, Lord Cole's voice explained, with obvious satisfaction. Honor sometimes requires difficult choices. The needs of many outweigh the needs of one. Jake stared at the cage. The child inside looked back at him with huge, frightened eyes. Every instinct in his body screamed that this was wrong, but he also knew that this was exactly the kind of test that would appeal to Zephyrian thinking. They valued results over methods, and sacrificing one life to achieve a greater goal was considered acceptable. But Jake also remembered Lady Senna's words about finding human solutions to Zephyrian problems. He pressed the green button immediately. The chamber erupted into chaos. Blades swung down from the ceiling, energy beams shot across the room, and the floor began tilting at dangerous angles. Jake had to reach the exit on the far side while the child escaped through a different route. The watching Zephyrians gasped as Jake dove under a spinning blade, rolled across a tilting platform, and leaped over a pit of spikes. The trial was designed to be nearly impossible, assuming that no one would be foolish enough to risk their life for a stranger, but Jake had been a soldier. He had risked his life for strangers many times before. As he navigated the deadly obstacles, taking cuts and bruises but never stopping. He could hear the child's cage opening and small footsteps running toward safety. A beam of energy grazed Jake's shoulder, spinning him around and sending him tumbling toward a pit. He caught himself on the edge, his injured shoulder screaming in pain as he pulled himself up. Blood was running down his arm and his vision was starting to blur. The exit was only 10 feet away, but between him and safety was a corridor filled with swinging pendulum blades. Jake timed their movement, waited for his moment, and sprinted forward. The first blade missed him by inches. The second caught his uniform, tearing the fabric but not his skin. The third blade was out of sequence, moving faster than the others. Jake threw himself forward in a desperate leap, just as the blade whistled through the space where he had been standing. He hit the floor hard, rolled, and came to rest at the base of the exit platform. Behind him, he could hear the child reaching safety. The trial was complete. Jake struggled to his feet, blood dripping from his wounded shoulder. The watching Zephyrians sat in stunned silence. No one had ever chosen the dangerous path before. No one had ever risked death to save the life of a stranger during the honor trial. From her position in the noble viewing area, Lady Senna was staring at Jake with an expression he couldn't read. Her skin was cycling through colors rapidly, and she seemed to be struggling with some internal conflict. Captain Vorn stepped forward again. "My lord, I must insist on examining the trial equipment. The energy beam sequence was not operating. Within normal parameters, Lord Cole's skin flashed bright red. Captain, you forget your place. Return to your position immediately." But other nobles were beginning to murmur agreement with the captain. Something was clearly wrong with the trial equipment, and Jake's injuries were more severe than they should have been. Jake wiped blood from his forehead and looked up at Lord Cole. "What's the next trial?" Lord Cole's expression was pure hatred now. He had expected the human to die or at least fail during the honor trial. Instead, Jake had not only survived, but had demonstrated a kind of moral courage that challenged everything Zephyrian culture believed about honor and sacrifice. "The test of unity with the eternal flow," Lord Cole announced. "The final trial. Here, human, your alien nature will finally betray you." Jake nodded, though he was swaying on his feet from blood loss and exhaustion. He had passed 5 trials, but the hardest one was still ahead. And from the look in Lord Cole's eyes, Jake knew that the Zephyrian noble was planning something that would ensure this trial would be his last. The final trial chamber was a perfect sphere carved from a single piece of crystal that seemed to contain the light of distant stars. Jake stepped inside and immediately felt something different in the air, a subtle energy that made his skin tingle and his thoughts feel somehow larger than before. "The test of unity with the eternal flow," Lord Cole announced, his voice echoing strangely in the crystal chamber. "Here, the candidate must achieve perfect harmony with the cosmic force that connects all Zephyrian consciousness. No alien species has ever succeeded because their minds are not designed to interface with the eternal flow." Jake sat in the center of the chamber as instructed, crossing his legs and trying to ignore the pain from his injured shoulder. Around him, the crystal walls began to glow with soft patterns of light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. Amy's voice was barely audible through the interference. "Jake, the eternal flow is essentially a form of quantum consciousness, field that Zephyrians evolved to access naturally. Their brain structure includes specialized neural clusters that humans don't have. So this was it. The impossible trial that would finally prove Lord Cole right? Jake was being asked to do something that was biologically impossible for his species. He closed his eyes and tried to clear his mind, searching for some way to approach this challenge. The crystal chamber filled with energy that pressed against his consciousness like a living thing. Jake could sense vast networks of thought and emotion swirling around him, but they felt alien and incomprehensible. This was the Zephyrian collective unconscious, the spiritual foundation of their entire civilization. But as Jake sat quietly, bleeding and exhausted from the previous trials, something unexpected happened. Instead of trying to access the eternal flow through Zephyrian methods, he began drawing on his own spiritual traditions. the meditation techniques his grandmother had taught him from her Buddhist practice, the prayer forms he had learned during his military service from soldiers of many faiths, the connection with nature that came from quiet moments watching stars during long space voyages. Human spirituality was different from Zephyrian spirituality, but it was no less real. Where Zephyrians sought unity through collective consciousness, humans found meaning through individual connection to something greater than themselves. Where Zephyrians accessed cosmic forces through biological evolution, humans reached for transcendence through choice and discipline. Jake began to feel something shift in his awareness. Not the alien network of Zephyrian thought, but something deeper and more universal. The quantum field that underlay all consciousness, the basic connection between all living things that existed regardless of species or biology. The crystal chamber began to resonate with new frequencies as Jake's human approach to spiritual unity created harmonics that the Zephyrian designers had never imagined. His meditation was not trying to join the eternal flow, but to touch the source from which all flows emerged. From the viewing platform, gasps of amazement arose as the chamber filled with light patterns unlike anything seen before. The crystals were responding to a form of consciousness they had never encountered, creating new harmonies that seemed to expand their very understanding of what spiritual unity could mean. Lord Cole watched in horror as his perfect trap turned into something beautiful and transcendent. "This is impossible," he whispered. "The human cannot achieve unity with forces beyond his biological capability." But Jake was not trying to become Zephyrian. He was bringing his own humanity to bear on universal questions of connection and meaning. The result was something that honored both human and Zephyrian approaches to spirituality while transcending the limitations of either. The crystal chamber reached a crescendo of light and sound that seemed to echo through the entire ship. When it finally faded, Jake opened his eyes and found himself surrounded by patterns of energy that pulsed with gentle, welcoming warmth. He had achieved not just unity with the eternal flow, but had expanded its very definition, the watching. Noble sat in stunned silence. Captain Vorn was staring at his instruments in amazement. Even Lady Senna seemed overwhelmed by what she had witnessed. Lord Cole stood on his platform, his skin cycling rapidly through colors that Jake had never seen before. "No," he said, his voice rising. "This is not possible. The human has cheated. Somehow, he has used technology or trickery to fool the trial systems." Jake stood slowly in the center of the chamber, his injured shoulder throbbing but his spirit filled with a peace he had never experienced before. "I have completed all 7 trials according to the ancient laws. The wager was fair and witnessed by all present." "The wager is void," Lord Cole shouted. "No alien can truly understand our spiritual traditions. This proves nothing except human deception." Captain Vorn stepped forward, his own skin showing the deep blue of formal authority. "My lord, I have monitored every trial personally. The human achieved genuine unity with the eternal flow using methods unknown to our science. According to our oldest laws, he has proven himself worthy of any honor within Zephyrian society." "Captain, you forget yourself," Lord Cole snarled. "I am your superior, and I declare this entire trial invalid." But other voices were rising from the noble viewing areas. Ancient Zephyrian law was clear about the trial of 7 spheres. Once begun, it could only end in success or death. There was no provision for declaring results invalid because they were unexpected. Lord Cole's skin shifted to the angry orange of desperation. "Very well," he said, drawing his ceremonial blade. "If the trials cannot prove human inferiority, then I will demonstrate it personally." The crystal chamber fell silent as Lord Cole leaped from his platform, his weapon gleaming in the strange light. Jake barely had time to dodge as the 8-foot-tall alien warrior brought his blade down in a deadly arc. "This is violation of the most sacred laws," Captain Vorn shouted, but Lord Cole was beyond reason now. His reputation, his pride, everything he believed about Zephyrian superiority was crumbling before his eyes. Jake rolled away from another sword strike, his injured shoulder making movement difficult. Lord Cole was faster and stronger, with longer reach and a deadly weapon. But Jake had spent years in combat zones, and he knew how to fight larger opponents. Instead of meeting force with force, Jake used Lord Cole's momentum against him. When the alien noble lunged forward, Jake sidestepped and used the Zephyrian's own weight to send him stumbling into the crystal wall. "You cannot defeat me, insect," Lord Cole roared, turning for another attack. "I am Zephyrian nobility, descended from warriors who conquered star systems. And I'm a human who believes that honor matters more than winning," Jake replied, staying out of reach of the deadly blade. The fight continued for several minutes, with Lord Cole growing more desperate and reckless with each failed attack. His perfect warrior image was being destroyed in front of hundreds of witnesses as a smaller, injured human evaded his every strike. Finally, Captain Vorn could stand no more. "Guards, arrest Lord Cole for violation of sacred trial law and assault upon a proven warrior." Zephyrian soldiers entered the chamber, their weapons trained on their former commander. Lord Cole looked around wildly, realizing that his violation of ancient law had cost him everything. "The human has dishonored our traditions," he screamed as the guards approached. "He has made a mockery of everything we believe." "No, Captain," Vorn said firmly. "You have dishonored our traditions by refusing to accept the results of a fair trial. The human has shown us new ways to understand old truths." As Lord Cole was led away in restraints, the assembled nobles formally stripped him of his titles and holdings. According to Zephyrian law, his crimes had severed all his family bonds and political connections. Jake found himself standing alone in the crystal chamber, finally able to process what had happened. He had done the impossible. He had completed the trial of 7 spheres and won the wager. Lady Senna approached him slowly, her skin showing colors of uncertainty and hope mixed together. "According to the wager, I now belong to you," she said quietly. "My marriage to Lord Cole is dissolved, and I am bound to serve you as I served him." Jake looked at this beautiful, intelligent being who had shown him kindness when she could have remained silent. The idea of owning another person disgusted him, regardless of what alien laws might say. "Lady Senna," he said formally, "I renounce all claims to you as property or prize. You are free to choose your own destiny, whether that means returning to your homeworld, staying with your people, or traveling wherever your heart leads you." The crystal chamber fell completely silent. No Zephyrian in history had ever renounced a rightfully won prize, especially one as valuable as a noble wife. Lady Senna stared at him for a long moment, her skin cycling through shades of amazement and gratitude. "You would give up your prize just to grant me freedom?" "No one should be owned by another person," Jake said simply. "If I took you as my prize, I would be no better than the man I defeated." Lady Senna stepped closer, her skin settling into a warm golden color that Jake had learned indicated deep emotion. "Then perhaps I might choose to travel with you, not as property or obligation, but as a free being seeking new experiences with someone who has proven his worth through deed rather than birth." Jake smiled, feeling something lighter than victory.